both on, we have a two-part program, which is kind of unusual for us, but we know you're all itching to learn more, especially more about PFAS, which seems to be in the news every single day, as well as sustainability, which many of you may not know how much actual work goes into that. We'll hear about that from a couple people. As you will note on the screen, we will be meeting in person on December 17th at CBIA. We thought about doing it at the Yard Goats and having social distancing, one person every 6 rows being outside, but I think we jinxed that or nixed that or whatever. So we'll be meeting in person. Hopefully everybody that comes will be fully vaccinated, whatever that means these days. And if you're not, remember to wear a mask. Are we going to have to wear masks anyways?
No, our building's lifting that come Monday.
Okay. Of course, that could change with the way things are going.
After Thanksgiving, yep.
You know, that could change. We're also going to do something different. We're going to do a Yankee swap this year. So we're going to trade, the Red Sox are going to trade for Aaron Judge in exchange for replicas of their World Series rings that they've gotten since the Yankees last got one. So that's my version of a Yankee swap. There you go. All right. I think that's about it. And December 17th will also be a transition for a number of people, and you'll hear more about that at December 17th at the holiday breakfast. Live in person with really good food. Right, Marcy?
Correct.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Debbie, who's going to introduce our panelists for more information on PFAS. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. I'm certainly looking forward to some of the wonderful bacon that they have at the breakfasts. So hello and welcome. We have Ray and Shannon here from the Deep to tell us more about the Connecticut PFAS Action Plan and how the different Deep programs are going to approach and implement. So brief introductions here. Ray is the Assistant Director of the Remediation Division at the Deep. After completing his degree in environmental earth sciences and spending several years working as a chemist in an environmental laboratory, he chose to devote his career to public service. Since beginning at the Deep 25 years ago, he has managed many complex environmental investigation and cleanup projects and has held leadership positions in multiple divisions within the Deep. So welcome, Ray. And we also have Shannon Pochu with us. Shannon is an environmental analyst 3 at the Deep, where she has worked in the Remediation Division for 22 years. She is the Remediation Division's lead on PFAS and emerging contaminants and was appointed the agency's lead on PFAS in 2019. In addition to being obsessed with PFAS, she manages the investigation and cleanup of state and federal Superfund sites, potable water projects, and other remediation sites. Prior to joining DEEP, she worked in environmental consulting for 4 years. She holds a BS in Natural Resource Management from UConn and a master's degree in environmental science from the University of New Haven. So welcome, Shannon. And Shannon's going to be sharing her screen to present the PowerPoint. We're going to ask that you hold your questions until the end or put them in the chat, and we will address them then. They have a lot to cover. So I'm going to now turn it over to Shannon and Ray.
Great. Thanks, Debbie. And thank you to CBIA for the invitation to come out today to share some of the updates from Connecticut Deep on the things that we're doing with respect to PFAS. And we've got a lot of really exciting things happening within Remediation Division. Many things. PFAS is just one thing amongst many initiatives that we have going on at this point in time. So an extremely busy time at DEEP in the Remediation Division. So focusing on PFAS, if you've heard Shannon and I at various venues throughout the state, what I always say is that with respect to PFAS, we're in this together. And I really do mean that. And it's because we're all learning together about how to test for this pollutant, how to determine its fate and transport in the environment, remedial options, you know, the health impacts. All this information is collectively coming at all of us at the same time. So from the state perspective, we've really been uh, pushing EPA, federal government, for some consistency amongst the states. As you all know, it's essentially a regulatory patchwork at this point in time. And very thankful to hear EPA within the last week or two give their roadmap for PFAS. And I think that is in large part addressing a lot of the concerns that Connecticut has been voicing over the last at least 2 years. So we lack a federal standard for cleanup. The impacts of PFAS are so far ranging, it's impacting every conceivable media. Remedial options are extremely limited. Those that we have are extremely expensive, as many of you know. We need some national assistance on research, the remedial options, analytical methods. You know, that has been slowly coming. So we'll share some more detail about that. So how about we get right into the agenda? Let's go to the next slide. And I also want to say that Shannon Pochu is really our resident expert on PFAS. So very thankful that Shannon's here today to give you detail beyond what I can provide. So here's our agenda today. We're going to talk a little bit about the PFAS action plan that was issued. Wow, it was 2 years ago. Crazy how time has been flying during the pandemic. We're going to talk about some of the things that we have underway pursuant to that action plan, reg status on PFAS, and the various programmatic approaches within DEEP. We'll even touch on a little bit on DPH. So again, very aggressive agenda. We are going to breeze through roughly 30 or so slides, and we're just going to touch on the key high points on each slide just to keep on track. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, the PFAS action plan. Many of you may recall that we had 3 main objectives when Governor Lamont assembled the interagency task force to evaluate PFAS, because this is impacting nearly all the state agencies. So we brought in a number of agencies, stakeholders, to talk about the how to minimize health impacts to Connecticut residents, minimizing future releases of PFAS, and how to identify and assess and ultimately clean up PFAS. Through that discussion, we realized that there's this overarching issue that we also need to be mindful of, and that is the education, outreach, and communication, as well as legislative opportunities swirling about on PFAS. Certainly with the outreach, one of our first cases that we had while we were in the midst of putting together the action plan was an accidental release of the AAF, the aqueous film forming foam, to the Farmington River. And we got a good, shot in the arm about public outreach and the concerns that citizens had within the Windsor Locks area. What is this material, and am I at risk? Is my pet at risk that may have been swimming in the water? Can I go fishing? All those types of issues came to the surface. Let's go to the next slide, and I think I'll be turning it over to Shannon to talk about putting our action plan into action.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Nice to sort of see you. Um, yeah, as Ray has said, we've really been busy trying to tackle PFAS on many fronts. And a lot of the steps that we've been taking over the past 2 years since the action plan was published really focus on trying to put the action plan recommendations into action. Diane Duva coined that when she was being interviewed on television for our AAF Take Back program. But it's really what we have been doing. We have a lot going on internally. We're coordinating within the agency, the different programs to see what we can do with, within our current statutory framework, with available resources, where we can leverage assistance. We have an excellent working relationship with the Department of Public Health and their core PFAS team, primarily focused on the drinking water section and environmental health. And we're working with other agencies, especially Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection, DAS and Yukon, and the Airport Authority, among others. So we're spending a lot of time trying to put these recommendations forward. We're also spending a fair amount of time just trying to keep up with the science, as you all are doing. There's just so much going on. DEP staff are involved in various New England regional and national work groups. For example, like ECOS, the Environmental Council of the States. So we get a national perspective, monthly meetings with them. And we're collaborating with local universities, folks at Yale and at UConn. There's quite a lot going on. And for those PFAS sites that have come up, we're sparing, of course, focusing on our attention on the affected residents and working with the municipalities, the local health departments to get them guidance, and also work with stakeholder groups. So there's definitely a lot going on. Okay. So just quickly, going to go over updates pertinent to the action plan. Ray mentioned one of the key recommendations included some legislative action to move some of the proposals forward. We did have 2 bills this legislative session that went through related to PFAS. One, Public Act 21-191, which Diane Duva and I spoke about last month, focused on limitations on future use of aqueous film forming foam used for extinguishing Class B flammable liquid fires. And it also a section pertaining to a future restriction on PFAS containing food packaging that would take effect in January of 2024. In addition, Department of Public Health had Public Act 21-191 go forward. That included many additional public health initiatives, but it did include language requiring testing of PFAS in bottled water. So, on. In addition, we did get an injection of funding that will be available to us that we will be requesting to further testing of potable water in areas that may have been affected by PFAS releases. So we're definitely looking forward to getting that funding and putting it to good use in the state. Just quickly, I'm providing this. The slides will be provided. There are links, and it's also for your reference. This is some more information on the AAF Band Legislation. The blue underline here, an act concerning use of, that's a hyperlink that will bring you to the actual legislation. It was signed into law in July. So if you want to know specifics, you can check that out later on your own. Quick summary of the dates that were placed in that legislation. The ban on AFFF testing and training was effective upon bill signing, so that was July 13th this year. And October 1st was a big date for discontinuing use of AFFF for either firefighting or vapor suppression purposes. And airports have 2 additional years to comply. The Part 139 airports in the state, the big ones like Bradley, Groton, Tweed, and Sikorsky, they have Federal Aviation Administration requirements, even though the FAA has said as of October 4th, there's not a requirement to use a PFAS containing foam. You still need to meet the military specification for that type of foam. And as of now, I'm not aware of any such alternative foam existing. So the airports have additional time to comply, plus 4 of the ones in the state have, they'll be guided by more FAA regulation. In addition, of course, we can't trump the feds. So for those facilities that are under federal mandates to use AFFF, they have until the federal government prohibits it or gives alternatives. Now, DEEP in conjunction, I'll just spend one more moment on this slide. DEEP in conjunction with the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection did work together trying to find alternative fluorine-free foams that would be suitable for use in the state's regional foam trailer program. After looking at several different types, they selected National Foam's Universal Green, and this hyperlink takes you to a statement by the Commissioner of DEEP identifying that there is an alternative foam available. A quick update on our AFFF Takeback program. I believe I showed this slide last month, but I do have an updated number. Apparently our collection program has collected and disposed of about 30,000 gallons of the AFFF concentrate at this point. Now, that would be containers of AFFF that would be stored at fire departments. We have not gotten to the foam that is present on top or within fire trucks throughout the state. We estimate there are about 400 fire trucks statewide that have some sort of AFFF containment cell on board. So we're looking at approaches to decontaminate those as well, but we've currently run into a little financial snag. So we're going to need a lot more money to move forward with that program. So we've hit pause for now.
But I would add, Shannon, we're really, really proud of the collection.
Oh, absolutely.
30,000 plus gallons. When we were in the midst of discussions with the task force, it was pretty clear to all of us that getting this material out of Connecticut firehouses is going to do a lot of good. We can, as I call it, stop the bleeding of these routine, common deployments of a very concentrated PFAS material.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that did not know that there were regional state trailers, this is what they look like. They contain 500 gallons of AFFF concentrate. There are 8 of them located roughly in each county statewide, and municipalities can call upon them for use if there are major incidences that need to be responded to. So far we've cleaned 3 of the 8 trailers and done trial cleaning of 3 traditional fire trucks. And we're still waiting on lab results. It's taking a while. So just for any of you that are doing PFAS related investigations and you get frustrated with the turnaround time, we're experiencing it too. We're no different. We also had an initiative. We were aware that some municipalities had proactively changed out their AFFF over the past couple of years. So we obtained permission to collect samples of the new foam that they put in, which is in theory PFAS free. Did some sampling and we're reviewing those results as well. But it looks like we're seeing that if no cleaning of the fire truck is done before you refill with your green foam, that there is cross-contamination that will occur. So your PFAS-free foam will become PFAS-full foam in essence. So we're evaluating that and can report back later on. Other projects. One of the recommendations in the PFAS action plan was that we really need to get a handle on what the universe of sites, of potential sites are in the state, so that we know what we're dealing with and how we can prioritize our future actions. So in conjunction with that, we need to understand spatially where they're located. So we've been working on a GIS project, and I think somebody last month had asked me, what are the green dots? I think they're they could be POTWs or maybe not. I don't remember. I have to check. But at some point, we will have a version of this available online for the public. But again, we want to stress that these are largely potential sources. A lot of them are based on suspected PFAS user industry codes that we obtained from EPA and other sources. So, there's hesitation about wanting to blacklist anyone without, we can't say that you definitely have PFAS at your site. We don't know that. But we want to be concerned about where the potential exists, in particular, so that we can focus on drinking water supplies. That's our first priority. And of course, we're also very concerned about our surface water and fisheries. But in this case, people first. And just to point to the last bullet, which DEP is not planning to test 2,400 sites. Ray and Lori Matthew from DPH were interviewed, I think by the Connecticut Mirror, and there was a follow-up question about, well, how many sites do you think you're going to have in this database? And at the time, based on the universe of sites, including landfills, POTWs, EPA identified sites, and all the NAICS codes, it numbered roughly 2,400. And that got misinterpreted to the fact that DEP is going to test all of these sites. It's like, no, that's impossible. I don't think anybody can do that. But we want to know where the sites are and be able to evaluate what kind of potential risk they may present if PFAS were to be present. Okay, I'll move along now. I'll try to. Hold on a minute, my screen doesn't want to go. There we go. Okay, other topics in the action plan involved, we need to get a handle on what the current status of PFAS is in the state, including at our municipal wastewater treatment facilities. So to that extent, the agency, we were able to leverage some funding to sample about 1/3 of the state's publicly owned treatment works. The first round of sampling was completed at the end of September. And at these 35 POTWs, they're located throughout the state, represent all different types of characteristics. Some have large commercial industrial type influent, others are more residential, rural settings. So we'll be able to take a look at that data and see what sort of sewer sheds, if you will, are more problematic or have a greater PFAS load. So we're testing influent, effluent, and sludge at all of the facilities. 5 of the POTWs have incinerators, so we're testing the scrubber water. And then we did have some funding available to perform some surface water and fish tissue sampling of 10 of the receiving streams. There will be a second round of sampling at the same facilities, with the exception of, I think, surface water and fish was a one-time only. And we hope to have results on that sometime next spring. So that will be very interesting. We also have remediation sites. We've been performing private well sampling in 2 towns in the state, Killingworth and East Hampton, where we learned through the Department of Public Health, they received reports from public water systems in these towns that PFAS was detected in the community well systems. So DEP has responsibility for looking at private wells that may be impacted by anthropogenic sources of pollution, and PFAS certainly fits that bill. So following up on Killingworth, we spent a lot of time there. About 70 wells have been sampled. 16 exceed the state's drinking water action level, and we have been able to provide carbon treatment to those homeowners, and we're getting ready to start a source investigation there. East Hampton, similarly, it was the community water system had a PFAS detection in addition to some chlorinated solvents from long ago. It's also nearby an area that a big bell manufacturer had a fire some years ago. So we've been trying to sample. And strangely enough, in East Hampton, people aren't all that interested in having their wells sampled. So for those who have actually granted us access, so far we found one exceeding the action level for PFAS, and we're working with them, and sampling is ongoing. Okay, and this is of interest. We were approached last spring by a professor at UConn's engineering department, Dr. Yu Lee, very interested in PFAS, and asked DEEP and DPH if we would be willing to sponsor senior design projects for their engineering students. So we tossed them a handful of ideas and they bit. So we have 4 different groups of highly motivated, bright students at UConn working on different PFAS projects. One group is tackling a soil background study, which unfortunately is sort of funding dependent to actually do the sampling and analysis, but at least to develop a plan for it. Another group of students looking at different in situ soil remediation alternatives. We're actually meeting with them later this morning. And another group looking to answer the question, is PFAS really in artificial turf? We sporadically get this question as more municipalities are looking to modify or improve their recreational fields. So this keeps coming up and we need to get an answer to it. So there's a group looking at that. And DPH's lab certification program put out a challenge to see if any of the students could develop a better, faster PFAS laboratory extraction method. So we'll see what these students are able to come up with, but it's pretty exciting. Next. Ray, I know I'm talking a lot. I can talk all day, so I'll just keep going. Okay, so transitioning from the action plan, CBIA asked us if we could talk about, well, what is the current regulatory status with regard to PFAS? I know you're particularly interested in what DEEP is doing, but I wanted to give a little framework of, what EPA and Department of Public Health are doing as well. Ray really touched upon in his introductory remarks. What EPA is moving forward. We're working with them. We're waiting for them to report back. Just a couple weeks ago, they announced a PFAS strategic roadmap, which I've provided a link to. Also, EPA's general PFAS webpage. From there, you can get to everything PFAS that EPA has available. But with the roadmap, I'm very encouraged that EPA is recommitting to following up on PFAS. I know from talking with EPA staff that they're very excited to be able to do more now under the current administration, politics aside. So they're putting a focus on research, restricting, and remediating. We still don't have a drinking water standard yet, the maximum contaminant level, but they are making steps toward that final rule, which is expected, I think, let me move screens, in the fall of 2023. That's still a long way off. It doesn't preclude the need for states to continue acting. Just last week, or was it earlier this week? The weeks go by so fast. EPA submitted draft toxicology documents to their science advisory board with new toxicity information on PFOA and PFAS. And their reference doses that are proposed are 4 orders of magnitude lower than what they used for developing their 2016 Lifetime Health Advisory, which brought us the 70 parts per trillion for the sum of PFOA and PFAS in drinking water. I don't know what this is going to mean. I know the toxicologist at the Department of Public Health is reviewing all of that data. She's got a lot of work ahead of her, but we'll keep you posted certainly on any changes that the Department of Public Health here in Connecticut recommends in the future. PFAS is still not currently regulated as either a hazardous waste or a hazardous substance, but there seems to be some movement on that. And there's a proposed rule on circular hazardous substances expected next spring. EPA is also working on effluent limitation guidelines for certain industry sectors and NPDES permitting. And they're doing a lot of research. Unfortunately, a lot of that takes time. So we're waiting, and we're trying to be encouraging to their progress. Okay, next, a little bit about DPH. As many of you are aware, our Department of Public Health in the fall of 2016 established a drinking water action level. It's non-enforceable, it's advisory, but they established theirs for the sum of 5 PFAS, identified there: PFOA, PFAS, PFNA, HXS, and HPA, of 70 parts per trillion, based on what they thought were similar toxicological endpoints. The additional 3 had similar to PFOA and PFAS. So DEP has been working with that number, and for the private well sites where we are sampling, that is the guideline we're using for determining whether treatment is warranted. Now, we've been saying this, and it continues to be true. You look around at what other states are doing, and the drinking water action levels, or for those states who have established state MCLs, they keep going lower and lower. DPH continues to review the toxicological information, and we're expecting some updated information from them shortly. Hard to estimate when, but they are following it and take it very seriously. We did have good news this fiscal year. the Department of Public Health received funding to purchase the laboratory equipment to analyze PFAS in-house at the State Health Lab in Rocky Hill. So they're in the process of purchasing that equipment now, and we'll need to get it set up and do all their testing, performance testing. So they're estimating that by the middle of next year, hopefully they'll be able to start analyzing drinking water samples. And I know their priorities are going to be looking at underserved communities and smaller community systems that may not have the funding to do their own sampling. Also, schools, daycares, where we have a lot of sensitive receptors. Okay, next, moving along to DEP programs. I mentioned earlier that we are coordinating within the agency. We have routine meetings where we share information, discuss different initiatives that we may be able to move forward under our existing statutory framework and with available staffing. So I've summarized in the next few slides some of the approaches that different divisions are taking with respect to their programs. So first, Ray, would you like to tackle this one? And I'll get a sip of water.
Sure. Be happy to take this one. So Remediation Division. Here's the long and short of it. If PFAS is a constituent of concern when you're performing your site investigation, you should be looking for it. DEEP is not coming out and saying you must sample for PFAS now. In large part, we've got a number of targeted areas that we would like to sample, but that is coming in the not too distant future. And the things that I'm talking about refer to, in large part, landfills. We know that those are sources of PFAS, so we will be getting there in time. But for the regulated community, if you're engaged in an environmental cleanup pursuant to any of our various cleanup programs, and PFAS is a constituent of concern, look for it. Go to the next slide, Shannon. So here are the remediation standard regulation criteria that we have in place at this point in time as additional polluting substance criteria. Now, in a previous slide, Shannon was mentioning that the DPH drinking water action level may be lowered in the future as more tox data is coming in. Should that number go down, the inputs to these APS criteria will also go down. So all we can really say at this point in time is stay tuned. Also would like to note, many have been asking, well, what's the surface water protection criteria? We don't have one at this point in time. In fact, the vast majority of states out there don't have an APS criteria similar for surface water. So should Connecticut be the first out there on that? We're not really confident that we want to initiate such a criteria at this point in time, but certainly the data that is being collected now with the surface water sampling, the POTW sampling, may help inform our decision as to what a surface water protection criteria should be.
Right.
We'll go to the next.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to go back for a minute with the surface water protection criteria. And I see there's a question, can the regulated community propose APS? Yes, absolutely. And it's more efficient, I guess, time-wise on everyone's end if DEEP already has one calculated that you could request on the APS fast track form. But you're welcome to submit anything you think is reasonable and protective. One of the things, and we get to this in a couple of slides, the surface water protection criterion is going to be closely tied to any ambient water quality criteria that's developed. And that is in the works. And once that is established, surface water protection criteria can be determined. So they're tied together. So, okay. Just wanted to add that. So, for significant environmental hazards, where do PFAS fit in? Well, they fit in under one particular subsection, 6UC, which basically applies for any contaminant for which there is not an RSR criterion promulgated already. So if in the course of investigating, you discover pollution of a drinking water well with that substance, then you are required to file the significant environmental hazard. And then the normal hazard obligations would apply for reporting and confirmatory sampling and a plan for further action. So we have had a couple of those filed. Okay, now we catch up with what I was saying about surface water quality. On the other side of the second floor, the Water Planning and Management Division, they have a couple different PFAS initiatives they're looking at. Tracy Ayot's group, the Water Quality Group, they are looking at a lot of water quality data, looking at bioaccumulation factors and so forth for the express purpose of trying to establish water quality criteria. So they're working on that and we'll keep you updated. The Water Monitoring Group has put together a work plan for statewide surface water and fish tissue sampling. However, that will also require specific funding, but when the funding becomes available, we have a plan to pull off the shelf and put into action. And municipal wastewater, I spoke earlier about the testing of the POTWs. They're primarily in an information gathering mode right now. I know, individuals who run the wastewater treatment plants, municipalities are very concerned. Oh no, if we sample, are we going to have to treat for it? And at this time, the answer is no. We just want to understand what is there. How much PFAS, specific types, and so that we can, try to get our hands around what the problem actually is.
If I could add to that,
Yeah.
Shannon, just want to make it abundantly clear, we are not looking to require the POTWs to do the treatment. We understand that they are not the source of PFAS. We need to go back to the source to look at what changes may be necessary as part of that function, or whether or not treatment is necessary prior to discharge.
Right, absolutely. And this information can help us focus on sewer sheds where maybe we need to look upstream and look at the influent sources, and perhaps target different types of potentially industries or dischargers to look at pre-treatment. That it seems to be source elimination is probably the best approach rather than trying to put all the burden on the POTWs. Okay, this will be a popular topic. Water Permitting and Enforcement Division, the closer side of the second floor. So recently, they've been focusing on discharge permits, and for new permits, renewals, and certain facilities that have had significant modifications to their discharges, and they are of certain SIC or NAICS codes that could be associated with PFAS use, they are requesting that an inventory be performed of the products and chemicals used. And if PFAS is used or suspected present, they are now requiring screening of some representative grab samples. So far, most facilities have confirmed that they're not using PFAS, which is great. There have been a couple instances of known PFAS. For example, there was an AAF decontamination wastewater project. Given that we don't have surface water criteria developed yet, or the ambient water quality criteria, and knowing that PFAS are persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic, it's within their authority to require treatment. So they have been asking for non-detect in a few of these instances prior to discharge to surface water or POTW. We were initially recommending using the drinking water method modified with isotope dilution. But now that EPA has come out with a draft method 1633 for environmental matrices, apparently the EPA and NPDES programs are really encouraging state programs to use this method for industrial wastewater discharges. So there will be more on this. This is developing policy, but the point is to try to eliminate sources before they can get into the environment and control what we can control now that we know it's a problem. And certainly they will be following EPA developments, and as new information comes out, they will be adjusting accordingly. Okay, here we go. Another fun PFAS topic, waste disposal. So as we all know, PFAS wastes are not classified as a hazardous waste, but in essence, they're being treated as such because of the hesitancy of many waste receiving facilities to even go there. If they're not permitted for hazardous waste, they're afraid that if in the future, if they accept the waste, they may become a regulated facility, and they don't want that. So sort of by default, PFAS is being treated unofficially as a hazardous waste. EPA published guidance last winter on destroying and disposing of PFAS. I was greatly disappointed personally. There's a lot of research that still needs to be done on incineration. So EPA is not recommending that at this time. And for DEP lead projects, projects that we're paying for, there's been an agency decision to go with secure landfilling rather than incineration at this point. So Waste Bureau, we're continuing to follow developments, and in essence, it's a Connecticut regulated waste. And the best advice we can give you is to contact your receiving facility for acceptance guidelines. This question came up last month. What about PFAS release reporting? Well, current state is you have to report all releases, regardless whether they're PFAS or not. And if the future release reporting regulations are adopted as is, and for PFAS, the current state will remain the future state. The draft language I copied below, in summary, says report a release of any quantity of a liquid containing PFAS in any amount. So there's the citation for you to refer to if you want additional information. Air Bureau. Okay, so in conversations I've had with Air Bureau folks, they're in a bit of a quandary as well. PFAS chemicals are not currently listed as hazardous air pollutants, with the exception of polytetrafluoroethylene decomposition products. They are listed in the regulation. However, there are no hazard limiting values, and it sort of punts it into the future. So they don't really have much they can work with. They're following EPA research and guidelines. There is a draft or another test method 45 for stack emissions. It would only detect a portion of potential PFAS chemicals, so they don't want to rely on that exclusively. So they're waiting for additional air sampling methods to be developed, and certainly they are in touch with neighboring states, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York in particular, and they're tuned into national work groups. So it's a big concern. And as far as all of the environmental matrices go, research in air seems to be further down the road from more of the soil and water related laboratory methods. So they're staying, they're keeping apprised. They have concerns about incineration. We still don't know what the residence time is and what the correct temperature is to fully destroy PFAS. So they have a lot of concerns that if it's not hot enough or long enough, are you going to be getting these products of incomplete combustion reforming in stacks and causing more of a problem? So these are some of the concerns they have. They're keeping abreast of the information as it comes out. So more on that in the future for sure.
If I could just add, Shannon, so the same concerns that our Air Bureau has about incineration also applies to thermal treatment of soil that may be impacted with PFAS. It is a remedial option that we would like to have within the toolbox for all of us to use, but we're not quite there yet. But do know that it is something that is actively being evaluated, and we're watching the work being performed by EPA's Office of Research and Development to help us in this regard.
Okay, and I'll probably just skip over these last couple of slides, but they'll be in the slide deck for you to refer to, just talking about different PFAS lab methods that are available. I just want to caution you that if you or your consulting firm are using a laboratory that uses a modified EPA method with isotope dilution, there's no real consistency among labs. So just to be aware of that. But we are very excited. I just want to highlight here the EPA method 1633. This is the one that we really want for environmental sites, for investigation and remediation sites. So it's a draft method now. It's expected to be final sometime next year. It's undergoing multi-lab validation, but it's broadly conforms to the Department of Defense recommendations in their quality systems manual. So for now, the highlighted box at the bottom for any remediation sites, this is what we would recommend for laboratory analysis. And next steps, we covered a fair amount. Surface water protection criterion, we really need that. We know the regulated community needs it for closing out remedial actions in Class GB groundwater areas. We expect to hear more on discharge permits in the future. Ray mentioned landfills. We would like to start a monitoring program that's reasonable for them. And we also, well, more internally, we need to get more laboratories on our state laboratory contract to analyze for PFAS. In addition, DPH will be hiring an additional person to help with laboratory certification. So that may help additional in-state labs obtain certification if they're interested. Ray, any wrap-ups?
Yes, Shannon. So to environmental consultants, my suggestion is pick up your SOP for PFAS sampling. Dust it off, get it in good shape. Your expertise is going to be needed going forward. We don't know at this point in time what the infrastructure bill may mean for PFAS investigation and cleanup, but certainly we see on the horizon funding for the state revolving fund at DPH for extension of public water to impacted areas. So not too much that we can say on the infrastructure bill at this point, other than brownfields. With respect to the Remediation Division, it's really PFAS and brownfields that have a nexus to the infrastructure bill. I think we may be at our time limit, Shannon. I hope you found this information helpful, and I'll leave it to Marcy whether or not we can take some questions. Or Debbie, for that matter.
Thank you. Yeah, we have time for maybe one or two questions. I see Plato asked in the chat, what about storage and incidental spills? AFFF is often stored in 5-gallon containers in firehouses with floor drains. Is there any regulatory requirement to store these containers in secondary containment?
It's not a hazardous material at this point in time. And in large part, we've gotten those 5-gallon containers out of the firehouses.
Okay.
You know, there may be some lingering containers that could be found over time. But Shannon had also mentioned that it's really the onboard AFFF, onboard the fire trucks themselves that should be about the only remaining AFFF in municipal fire departments across the state. And that's something that we are hoping to get to with the assistance of DESPI.
Okay. And are there any spill reporting requirements at this time for PFAS containing compounds?
Yeah, we covered that. I didn't see when his question came in, but release reporting, any PFAS, right now, any release needs to be reported. And in the future state, should those regulations be promulgated, it'll stay the same for any PFAS containing liquid, including AFFF. I didn't realize I was muted before. I just wanted to add, relative to storing AFFF containers in secondary containment, certainly not a bad idea. ITRC has a great PFAS technical regulatory document, and they have recommendations for best management practices relating to AFFF, use, storage, and I think for disposal in the future. And can small spills of AFFF be rinsed down the drain? No.
And I think we're going to be finding a lot of PFAS issues throughout the state because of that very thing, rinsing equipment that has been used with AFFF. Fire departments, that's one type of property that we're concerned about.
And I guess, is there any guidance for industries? Some industries have their own, AFFF foams that are, or they have their own on-site fire training facilities. What do you recommend, I guess, or propose that they do if they do have this AAF on site?
So first and foremost, and Shannon, please chime in on this. The law that was passed this year prohibits use of AAF for training purposes. We are looking for additional alternatives, green alternatives. As Shannon mentioned, we have a minimum of one green foam that's out there that's been approved for use. I shouldn't say approved, it's at least endorsed. We've run it through some rigorous analytical testing to ensure that we don't have regrettable substitutes within these types of materials. And we with DESPI have announced what was it, which foam was it, Shannon?
It's universal green.
Universal green.
National foam?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
national.
not the only one. It's not the only one that's out there. The green screen
Yes, I was going to mention that.
alternatives. Yep. So a green screen vetted foam could be used. We've seen private entities within our state, totally removing their AFFF fire suppression systems to do away with it. In some cases, this is going to require input and potentially assistance from state fire marshal. Is an AFFF suppression system currently needed, or was it a belt and suspenders when it was initially installed? We have other locations where the AFFF fire suppression is required, but the entity has chosen to remove the AFFF and rinse their existing system, treat the effluent, and then discharge.
And non-detect is achievable, even with AFFF rinse waters. But again, the price. So we're interested in research that is ongoing to give us effective, not only technically effective, but also cost-effective solutions for dealing with PFAS waste. The state is, we're in this with you, because with the AFFF decontamination program, we're paying for this right now. So we see what the costs are. We understand the challenges, and it's not easy. So hopefully technology will advance.
Yes, thank you. And I was happy to see that the DPH is obtaining some the lab equipment needed to run. I guess it's 537. It has been, we have definitely been experiencing pain points with our PFAS analyticals and getting the results. So I understand. All right, we have run 5 minutes after our allotted time. I want to thank Shannon and Ray for joining us. Very informative, really appreciate it. And understand that this is still developing. So I'm sure we'll be inviting you back here soon.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks.
We really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for having us and the great questions. And yes, I will make a PDF of the slides and forward them to Marcy for distribution. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Shannon. All right, and I'm going to pass it over to Lee now to get started on our sustainability success stories.
Fantastic. We have some exciting stories to tell you about today. First up, we're going to hear from Claire Connolly, who right now she manages Eversource's sustainability team and is responsible for leading the company's strategic work with respect to environmental, social, and governance performance. Prior to that, she held a similar role at Cabot Corporation and for several years. And under Claire's tenure at Cabot Corporation, that corporation was named as one of the most responsible companies by Corporate Responsibility Magazine back in 2017. She's had a couple of other positions in the sustainability field, and she holds a bachelor's degree in environmental science from Boston University and a master's degree from Harvard University, where she's also been a guest lecturer. And then after Claire goes, we'll hear from Jillian Spratt, and I'll introduce her at the end of Claire's presentation. And then what I would ask is that if you put your questions in the chat box, that would be fantastic. And we'll hold those until the end, and we'll bring both Claire and Jillian back to make sure that we get all the questions answered, but we'll hold those until the end. And so with that, I'd like to turn things over to Claire.
Thank you very much, Lee, and thank you all for inviting me to join you today. I'm really excited to be with you and share some of the work that we're doing at Eversource around sustainability. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm sure many of you are aware of Eversource and what we do, but just a very quick overview. We're the largest energy company in New England, providing essential electric, gas, and water utilities to 4.3 million customers. And we have over 9,000 employees across our 3 states, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. Our sustainability team works very hard with different functional groups across the company to ensure we're pushing ourselves. And I'm really proud of the progress we continue to make. So I look forward to sharing some of those highlights with you. Next slide, please. So first off, I think an important point to make here is sustainability is really central to how we do business and maintain our industry leadership. It is the intersection of environmental, social, and governance issues that helps us ensure we are conducting our business with integrity and in a socially and environmentally responsible manner. It earns us the trust of our stakeholders and demonstrates we are committed to having a positive influence in the issues that really matter the most to all of us. It's also importantly integrated throughout the organization. So this is all the way up to the Board of Trustees. We have oversight from our leadership to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable and really driving progress in each of these areas. Next slide, please. Underpinning our sustainability work is a commitment to deliver transparent and current communication on our progress. And we do this mainly through our annual sustainability report. I'll just do a little plug here. If you haven't seen our sustainability report, I encourage you to take a look if you have a moment. We have a lot of great information in there. And we really made a dedicated effort this past year to make the report really interesting and compelling for different readers to go through and learn more about what we're doing. So hopefully it will be an enjoyable experience for you to take a look at that. But it's an important way for us to align with some of the most reputable frameworks for reporting, including GRI, TCFD, and SASB. And we're also engaging with a number of rating organizations, which you'll see in the bottom left of this slide, to make sure that we're providing detailed disclosures to various stakeholders on a regular basis. And so the process of going through our disclosures and reporting cycles is that it allows us to not only provide the most current information to our stakeholders so that they're able to compare our performance against our peers, but it also holds us accountable to make sure that we're delivering on our promises and meeting our goals. So it's really a core focus of our work. Next, I'd like to walk you through some of the work that we're doing in each of those areas, ESG. So a lot of this information you can find in the sustainability report if you want to take a look and learn more, but I'll try to share some of the most exciting highlights with you. The next slide, please. So starting with environment, next slide. At the cornerstone of our environmental work is really our carbon neutrality goal. We're really excited about this very ambitious target of achieving carbon neutrality by 2030, which we introduced in 2019. And it focuses us on reducing emissions in 5 key areas. So line loss, methane, which is natural gas from our gas business, fugitive emissions, facilities, which would include energy used at all of our facilities in the form of electricity or fuel use for heating and emergency generation, and then fleet, which, as you would imagine, we have a significantly sized fleet. So we're looking at swapping out different fuels and converting to hybrid vehicles as much as we can. And then finally, SF6, which is a potent greenhouse gas used for electrical insulation. And again, that's a fugitive emission that we're attempting to draw down as much as possible. And to make this all happen, we have a dedicated governance committee. Within the organization, we have several working groups focused on specific areas to help us achieve this carbon neutrality goal. So those groups are listed there. We have a committee dedicated to reductions, so really pushing ourselves to explore different technologies and innovations and ways that we can draw down our emissions as close to zero as possible. But then we also recognize that it's virtually impossible to get all the way to zero, so we will need some form of offsets at the end of the day to achieve neutrality. And so we have a team already looking at what that should, what that portfolio of offsets could entail. Everything from, direct carbon credit purchases to more involved projects that provide added benefits to our communities. And then finally, two groups focused on engagement with our stakeholders, one for employees and one for outreach with external stakeholders to make sure that we're really engaging everybody in this really ambitious endeavor. Next slide, please. In terms of our current footprint, we're already seeing a positive or a beneficial decline. So in the last couple of years, we've seen a 17% reduction in our emissions, which is not a small feat, especially considering that as of 2018, we were fully divested of our energy generation, which is significant because the remaining footprint of our business is relatively smaller compared to other utilities, making the challenge that much greater. That, there aren't a lot of low-hanging fruits for us, and so we're really turning there's no stone unturned here, and we're looking for every opportunity possible to bring that footprint down as much as we can. This past year presented some challenges, as you might expect, with COVID, and we're very lucky that the only emission source that we saw increase in 2020 was related to our fleet, and that was for a very good reason. We introduced a safety protocol, which resulted in only one passenger per vehicle, just to make sure that people are being socially distanced and not exposing one another to possible COVID. And as a result, we used more vehicles, more fuel. We weren't able to utilize biodiesel as much as we normally would. And so the fleet emissions did go up slightly, but every other emission source went down. And we're actually very proud that even though it was a small decline from 2019 to 2020, I think it's a pretty significant achievement given the business conditions. Next slide, please. So in addition to our efforts to achieve neutrality in our own operations, so that would be scope 1 and 2, we are also working really hard to realize a cleaner grid. So we have a number of efforts underway, everything from renewable energy in the form of offshore wind and solar to improved battery storage. We're also looking into geothermal and connecting EV charging stations in our communities to allow greater adoption of EV vehicles. So there's a lot going on, and making investments in our current infrastructure is really important to make all of this possible as well. So I'd like to walk you through some of these highlights of each of these areas that we're working on to enable this cleaner grid. Next slide, please. We'll start with offshore wind. So we're leading the way in offshore wind with the development, with 3 main developments in partnership with Ørsted. So we have South Fork, Revolution, and Sunrise Wind underway. This is really exciting for us. We're making a lot of headway here, and we're the right people to be involved because we have a lot of experience in building and operating transmission systems and moving the power from place to place, while Ørsted has a lot of experience in the development of offshore wind in particular, and tracking the building and tracks buildings to the turbines. So our skill sets are really complement each other here. And through this process, we'll be able to generate 1,750 megawatts of renewable energy through offshore wind. So very exciting. Next slide, please. For solar and geothermal, again, a lot of great work happening here. We already have 22 solar facilities producing 70 megawatts of energy. This is equivalent to generating power for 11,000 homes. And just to put it in perspective, this is equivalent to taking 6,000 cars off the road. So it's really significant, the benefits that we get from solar, and we're hoping to deploy more solar as well in the next several years. Geothermal is also underway. So in Massachusetts, we are in the process of implementing a pilot project, which hopefully will get started next year. And this is a really interesting technology that uses passive mechanisms through the Earth's normal insulating properties underground to store hot air, warmer air in the ground during the summer. And conversely, in the wintertime, you can tap into the warmer air underground to help warm buildings in the wintertime. So it's a great technology. It's been around for a very long time, and we're excited to use existing infrastructure and build new infrastructure to test this technology in our communities. Next slide, please. I mentioned EV charging. So this is a really important factor in helping our states meet their aggressive climate goals. As I'm sure you all know, Connecticut and Massachusetts in particular have very ambitious targets to reduce greenhouse emissions and achieve net zero emissions. And with transportation as one of the biggest sources of emissions in our region, the ability for us to adopt more EV vehicles is going to be critical to actually achieve these goals. So the role that Eversource is playing in all of this is investing in infrastructure that will allow greater adoption of EV vehicles. As you would suspect, it's a big leap for a consumer to purchase an EV vehicle if they're not convinced that they're going to be able to get from point A to point B and have a fully charged vehicle in the process. So it's really important to have these points of charging stations at the most critical areas. So our participation in the Electric Highway Coalition is one way that we're contributing to that effort, making sure that we're doing everything we can to provide uninterrupted EV travel. And we've already done a lot of work in Massachusetts, really tripling the network within that state. And we're very proud to say that 19% of those installations were in EJ communities, which was over and above what our goal was at 10%. We're hoping to do similar projects in New Hampshire and Connecticut, so we're actively pursuing opportunities in those states as well. Next slide, please. It's also really important to improve our existing infrastructure. So we're investing in innovations through our existing transmission and distribution systems. And this will allow us to bring power where it's most needed and support the clean energy future that we're all hoping for. So transmission allows us to optimize the mix of energy and sources depending on what is most available and least expensive. And building transmission lines to bring power where it's needed will support the integration of the offshore wind and the solar and battery storage that's required. So not only does it help us improve the carbon footprint of the grid, but it also allows us to improve reliability and make sure that we're prepared for a changing climate. Next slide, please. Sorry. Okay. So as I said, you know, the grid has a lot of critical points that during what we're seeing in more frequent and severe storms resulting in climate change, we have to be prepared. So it's no doubt that climate change is already upon us, and we're seeing more and more storms, and they're more and more intense. And so we're building resiliency across the network to help us be prepared and make sure that when storms do hit, that it's, you know, we're reducing the risk of major outages as much as possible. And one way that we're working towards this is through our partnership with the University of Connecticut and the Eversource Energy Center there, which helps us reach the best balance between hardening the system and minimizing roadside vegetation. We're also deploying a number of technologies to help us make sure that when outages do occur, we're being really efficient about rerouting electricity and doing everything we can to keep the lights on while we restore the infrastructure. We're also very cognizant of rising sea levels. And so we have dedicated plans in place to make sure that substations and other infrastructure are mitigated in risk where there are likely areas of flooding and flood-prone regions. So we're taking a very conservative approach in all of that to, you know, recognizing that this is going to continue to hit us head on and we need to be prepared. At the same time, because we do, you know, require vegetation management, make sure our system is.
You on the CBI thing?
Oh, sorry. I think somebody was off mute. We're also investing in restoring vegetation through planting trees. And it's really important that we're planting very specific species of trees that are compatible with overhead wires. So on our website, you can actually find a list of 30 trees under 30 feet, which is a great resource to think about if you're planting trees near overhead lines. Okay, next slide, please. And then in our day-to-day work, our blue sky work, as we call it, we're also maintaining our environmental stewardship every day through our corporate environmental policy, which is guiding our work with everything from waste management and reducing the waste we generate, and then responsibly disposing and recycling of waste when it is generated, to preserving land and even protecting sensitive habitats for species in our right-of-ways. So one example here, over to the right, you'll see the eastern box turtle. We have a dedicated program called Turtlepalooza, which we use to train our contractors who are working in our right-of-ways to be able to recognize these sensitive species and move them to a safe location before they conduct their work when they do encounter them. So we're doing a lot every single day to make sure that we're protecting our environment and being a good steward. And then the final slide in our environmental area, next slide, please. Thank you, is our water utility business, Aquarion, is doing a lot, as you would imagine, to manage water, but really best-in-class practices when it comes to protecting watersheds and delivering clean drinking water to its 215,000 customers. So we work very closely with our water customers to conserve water, especially during times of drought. And you know, on an annual basis, we're saving an average of 680 million gallons of water. So it's really significant, and it's a true partnership between our Aquarion business and our customers to make sure that we are able to conserve this precious resource. And then let's move on now, next slide please, to social. So the S of ESG, next slide please. One of the things that we're really focused on right now, in addition to our safety and well-being with our employees, which is paramount, We're also really focused on celebrating our differences, and there's been a growing attention on diversity, equity, and inclusion, making sure that we're really embracing our differences throughout the organization, but also across all of our stakeholder groups. This includes our suppliers, our communities, catering to the differences of our customers to make sure that we're providing languages that are providing communications in languages that our customers are most comfortable with. And one of the things that I think we're really proud of internally is that this is really all the way up through our leadership team. Our CEO is at the helm, making sure that we're driving progress in this area, not only through the participation of the CEO action and Action for Diversity and Inclusion and the Paradigm for Parity programs, but also through a dedicated council within the organization. So our CEO led a number of employee meetings over the last year to disrupt racism, and we have training on a regular basis to help us practice the skills that are needed to make sure that we're being open and receptive of our differences throughout the organization. Next slide, please. I'll try to speed up a little bit because I know we have a great presentation coming from LeGrand as well. So I mentioned, from a diversity perspective, we're also looking at our customers and making sure that we're providing really, comprehensive communications and outreach to our communities. And that's also in the form of our charitable giving and volunteerism. So we work really closely with partnerships throughout our communities to make sure that we're focused on the needs of the people where we operate. And it's a really, I think, core part of who we are at Eversource. In fact, right now we're in the midst of a giving campaign for United Way. And we have volunteer activities throughout the year that employees are really passionate about and really enthusiastic to be able to give back to our communities. So it's a very much a part of who we are as an organization, and making sure that we're being very connected to the needs of our communities. One of the things that we also did during COVID was support our customers who are facing really tough times. I think many of us experienced hardships through COVID that came in many different forms, but certainly some of our customers had challenges paying their utility bills, and we worked very closely with them to delay their payments and even introduce forgiveness programs where during this really unprecedented time. So a lot going on to make sure we were being a good corporate citizen, especially during COVID. And then finally, we'll move into the G of ESG in the next slide. And you can move on to the next one, please. Thank you. So strong corporate governance is also a really important part of our sustainability program and the G of ESG. Our board of trustees is, we're very fortunate to have a diverse makeup at the board level, which is, again, coming back to our commitment to celebrating our differences, but also recognizing that through that diversity, we have greater effectiveness at the board level. That variety of perspectives and experiences really helps us be a stronger organization. We also, in the past year, reformed what was the governance committee at the board level to the Governance, Environment, and Social Responsibility Committee to represent the need to have that level of oversight of ESG. So really, important step for our company to bring the focus of ESG all the way up to the board level. And then, part of the work that happens at the board level and really is integrated throughout the organization as well and trickles down is our commitment to ethics and compliance throughout the business, really making sure that we're leading with integrity and we're a partner that our stakeholders can really count on. And next slide, please. trying to wrap up quickly here. And all of this, we're very proud to say that this doesn't go unnoticed. We are regularly recognized with awards and accolades from a number of organizations who see us as a leader and really, put us at the top of the list among utilities. So these are just a few examples of ones that are more recent, but we don't do it for the prize, but we're very grateful when our efforts are recognized, because there's an awful lot of work that happens behind the scenes every single day to make sure we are pushing ourselves and advancing and maintaining that industry leadership. So I will end there. The last slide is just a thank you, and I look forward to the Q&A in a little bit. So happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Claire. We'll hold the questions until the end, but feel free to start stacking them into the chat. Next up, we have Jillian Spratt, who is the Senior Circular Economy Analyst for LeGrand for North and Central America. Many of us remember Bill Luschan, who was the former chair of this group, who was also from LeGrand. She has a BS in environmental science and a master's in business communication, both from Rider University, where she's also been involved in teaching in the past. And indeed, she worked in the Sustainability and Utilities Department of Rider, supporting implementation of energy reduction projects, greenhouse gas reporting, and managing a team of student-led sustainability projects, which I can only imagine was an exercise in patience. You should also know that Jillian was recently featured by the U.S. Green Building Council in a piece this fall that discussed the success that LeGrand has had for its sustainability operations, particularly its utilization of LEED for operations and maintenance, which I'm hoping she's going to be touching on here today. And so with that, I will turn it over to Jillian.
Thank you so much. I don't have much on LEED in my presentation today, but I'm certainly happy to answer questions about it and share our case study as well. So thank you so much for that introduction. I've been with LeGrand for just under 4 years, and I'm a part of the corporate sustainability team that's headquartered in West Hartford. It has been probably a little bit over a decade or so that LeGrand has been actively incorporating sustainability and CSR into our everyday business. So over the next, 15, 20 minutes or so, I want to share with you kind of how we organize ourselves, what the focus of our programs are, and a few of the best practices where we've really seen success. Next slide, please. So quickly, just a little bit about LeGrand. We are the global specialist in electrical and digital building infrastructure. We have a multitude of different divisions and product categories that span both residential and non-residential markets, and that includes audiovisual, building control systems, data power control, electrical wiring systems, and lighting. In the US alone, we have about 50 facilities that are within the scope of our CSR program. And our vision is really to, what you see here, improve lives through transforming the spaces where people live, work, and meet through innovative products and solutions that deliver power, light, and data. You can see the ways in which we achieve this vision: collaboration across functions, fostering engagement, which I'll touch on today, striving to exceed customer expectations, constantly learning, and applying socially responsible practices. I may be slightly biased as someone on the corporate social responsibility team, but we also know that this last one is something that we know our customers have come to expect from us, and one that over time our employees have really rallied around. Next slide, please. So our commitment to corporate social responsibility is much more deeply ingrained in our company than being a part of our vision statement. It's also important to us because first and foremost, we think it's the right thing to do. We have a sincere conviction about the importance of business ethics and about being a socially responsible player in our community. It undoubtedly creates value for us. It helps us, of course, comply with regulations. We are a manufacturer. It is our responsibility to be aware of these regulations, comply with them, because we understand that we are part of a larger value chain. It attracts and retains those with a powerful desire to do this work, which I think is one of our most powerful assets as well. And of course, our customers, and it kind of enables our ability to meet this customer demand as well. Next slide. So in early 2019, Legrand published what is our current social responsibility roadmap, which will be in effect through the end of 2021. So wrapping this up, and we're prepping now to kind of roll out a new one for 2022 to 2024. But this roadmap that we're currently operating under, is the latest step in our CSR journey. And that's one that has been ongoing since we published our first CSR roadmap in 2007. And this right here is the key operating principle for achieving our goals. It defines 18 priorities organized within 3 focal areas that you see here: business ecosystem, people, and environment. Next slide, please. So these are our 18 priorities under the current roadmap. And these were identified after carefully considering input from many stakeholders throughout our company, including our large employee base. And at a high level within our business, on the left-hand side, we act ethically, we provide products and services that are sustainable, and we ensure that our suppliers also act in a socially and environmentally responsible way. For our people, we ensure that the health and safety of our employees is a top priority. We encourage our employees to continuously develop their skills. We promote diversity and equal opportunities for men and women. And we strive to improve the communities where we live and work through our volunteer and philanthropy program called Better Communities. And in terms of the environment, we work to help mitigate climate change by reducing our own carbon footprint. We design and engineer products to minimize their impact on the environment. That's another thing I'll get into today. And we work to prevent pollution by reducing our emissions of volatile organic compounds and reducing the amount of waste that we send to landfill. And while my team, the CSR team, kind of oversees that all of these are being implemented, the ownership and drivers may vary for each priority. My primary emphasis within the sustainability department is on the environmental portion, around carbon, energy, and waste. More recently, waste with circular economy. But I wanted to share this because, as I mentioned, it is the key organizing principle and really the North Star that gives us structure. And the way that we enforce this structure, in my opinion, is in itself a best practice. And that's one of the first best practices I want to share, as well as 2 initiatives that relate to the key areas under environment related to mitigating climate change and innovating for the circular economy. Next slide, please. So this is what I'll share with you today, the best practices around having dedicated CSR leaders and corresponding CSR communications. I'll share an example of how we have rallied our employees around our CSR targets. And then finally, share a new tool to us that we've seen tremendous success with related to product design. Next slide, please. So because our priorities come with challenging targets, we hope and expect that every site across Legrand, works together. So we've organized multiple cross-divisional CSR teams, and you can see again how they fall into our roadmap focal areas. This has multiple benefits. Having kind of, clear leadership positions helps us divide and conquer. It clearly delineates ownership in driving certain priorities. It helps others in the company understand the types of positions and titles and functions that are associated with CSR. And it also gives people outside of the sustainability team ways to be recognized for their efforts. This core team, as we refer to it, work with the sustainability team, the full-time sustainability staff you see on the bottom there, to be the liaisons between the corporate objectives and our many people. And we're able to have personal relationships and one-to-one support with almost 300 individuals across our sites under this structure. This core team also meets monthly to discuss updates across our profile and on a quarterly basis as well with our executives, to where we ask for support, we raise pain points and share success stories. Another reinforcing and essential piece to this best practice, and I think we can hop to the next slide, is, as I mentioned, a communication strategy that supports it, that's equally as clear. And so also on a quarterly basis, we publish a Legrand sustainability bulletin that is, again, organized by our roadmap focal areas. We drill this into the ground, and that bulletin provides updates, wins, surveys, trends. It recognizes the contributors at all of our facilities. And we've also created a recorded webinar training module that our associates can get training credit for, that goes into detail on each of our CSR priorities, that is available to everyone in the company. So more information is there when needed, but we also have dedicated templates for each priority that are kind of sent to a targeted audience as well. And that's what you see on the right-hand side. So when our CSR roadmap rolls out, which again, we're preparing to do for 2022, we introduce it through the creation of what we call divisional guidance documents. And these are issued to each business president and then cascades down to all levels of the company. And they list out, it's like an ingredient list, a cheat sheet. They list out exactly what our target is, the why behind it. Is it different than our target last year? And why might that be? The teams that are involved in the execution, what the reporting requirements are, including cadence, platform, any tools and resources that can help both internal and external. And we also provide a sustainability team contact for questions. So for example, my name would be on our upcoming target for eliminating single-use plastic, for example. But what these do is help demystify a roadmap with a lot of juicy information that can seem super overwhelming, and break it down into a one-stop shop of guidance for the priorities that this team needs to focus on versus what another team may need to focus on. So what both the team structure and the communication vehicles ultimately do is create champions for our roadmap and for sustainability, and people really begin to internalize the goals, but the key being we view it as our responsibility to create the material and to make that digestible. Next slide, please. So, acknowledging the target is one thing, getting involved in the target is another. And this is something we really take to heart, because we don't just want employees to be aware of what the company's CSR goals are, but we want them to engage with them. The divisional guidance documents are great, but we don't want to be hands-off afterwards. And I think it is easy to forget that others outside of the sustainability team are not digesting these targets in the same way that we do as full-time sustainability professionals. So one way we've gotten people to rally around our initiatives is through employee engagement, which is the second best practice I want to share today. One of these initiatives that we've seen tremendous success with is something called Energy Marathon. And this is where we challenge sites to reduce energy for 26.2 days, the length of a marathon. This initiative has been done a few times before, kind of on a biannual cadence. But in 2019, we had acquired a bunch of new sites, and suddenly our facilities were at different stages of their energy journey. At the same time, we were introducing a more challenging energy goal, which was to reduce our absolute energy consumption 3% over the prior year. That was challenging because our sites were used to energy intensity targets for as long as we could remember, which allowed them to grow in size and still manage their energy with some kind of throughput metric. So, with this shift, we thought, let's bring back Energy Marathon for the third time. And we asked over 4,000 employees across 26 sites that were prepared to participate, in that they had access to their energy meters. They were in the scope of our roadmap at the time, et cetera. And this was in hopes that we would find new reduction opportunities, of course, bring awareness to our roadmap efforts around energy, and just have fun and maintain some spirit. This required about 4 months of planning. What we did was chose a pro-am structure where we paired sites together and their progress was tied together. And this gave, veteran sites with less low-hanging fruit a chance to help out some newbies, some acquisitions, or some, lower performing sites, and at the same time forced older sites to get creative. But because their progress was tied together, what it did was facilitate best practice sharing and networking as well. We have a large footprint, so that still remains important. But best practice sharing among the two sites that were on the same team. Next slide. So some other planning, we had to identify what was needed on our end, what was needed on the site's end. Was there going to be a theme, a color? You can see we went with blue. What was our promotional strategy going to be? We knew we wanted to have giveaways, so we needed to identify those, procure those. The sites needed access to their meters. They needed to establish a process to submit weekly readings. We needed to create a template to calculate that usage. And we needed, again, a communication strategy. So we gave regular weekly emails that kept people in the loop, anticipating the status of where their team was at. But we also used it as an opportunity to include energy tips, links, resources, anything that would encourage the behavior that we were looking for. We had some, fun stickers made and sent out to the sites and challenged them to find creative ways to use them. We had, sites create, there was a poster competition and the winner kind of got their version digitally sent out to every site for, to be put on display in their facility. We had folks carpool. I love the Legrand caravan photo that you see here. But each week we had a competition that incentivized energy reduction activities, and there were many challenges on top of that gave, again, a way to internalize the goal and connect the dots of the types of activities that contribute to the goal. And, in some cases be unaware that you were even connecting those dots, and, have fun while doing so. The challenges we came up with were, prompts for both while you were at work and while you were at home. I think we asked one time to have our employees' children draw a picture of what the world will look like when we solve the climate crisis. So they brought these conversations home. And we continued to give shout outs to sites that, for a multitude of reasons, sites that never missed a meter reading, that were the most spirited, most competitive, the office that was in the lead, warehouse, manufacturing. And the top 3 teams, we got a plaque to hang in their facility, but also in the true name of this being a marathon and not a sprint. What we did was continue to challenge those top 3 teams to compete for an additional 2 months. And over this time, we didn't take meter readings, but instead we let them go on their own for 2 months after what they had learned. And at the end, asked for one final reading to determine the ultimate winning team. And this was to see if we could sustain the reduction efforts, right? Not just turn off the heat for 2 weeks, win the competition and call it a day. So the overall winning team, also received an on-site celebration, recognition in the CEO webcast. And most importantly, at the end of the event, we shared all of the learnings and best practices among the participating sites. You can see the overall results below in that table there. Certainly worthwhile for the planning that was required and the length of time. The good news is we developed a toolkit for how to do your own energy marathon, or make this kind of employee engagement strategy adaptable to something that you may be working on. And I've included that link in that word bubble there that will take you to our tools and resources webpage, where you can find both this toolkit and other toolkits as well that we have around waste and some other topics there. Next slide, please. So the last best practice I wanted to share is around tools that enable progress. Companies have their own tools, their own software platforms that they use. This one is a new tool that our sustainability team and some other volunteers have been developing. And it's related to what I previously discussed around giving people the resources that they need to succeed in one spot. And again, we do view that as our team's responsibility to create the conditions for success and associated tools. So we've called this tool the Circular Economy Playbook, and it's sort of exactly what it sounds like. It educates and empowers product design teams to create sustainable solutions and meet customer demand. It's an Excel-based tool organized through a series of tabs that first provide an in-depth overview of circular economy, provide some guidance on voice of customer. So it kind of instructs our teams on how to solicit the insight that we need to provide those customers with the sustainability attributes in our products that are most important to them and their needs. And then the remaining sections break down what we call the Legrand Way for eco-design. And that provides a pathway towards environmentally conscious design strategy. It includes technical guidance, templates, and working through the different tabs will guide the analysis and the comparison of different material options, what the carbon implications are of those material choices, of various design concepts, and it prompts you to also acknowledge and confirm adherence to various hazardous substance requirements, both in the US and the EU, where our parent company is located. And it continues through other design considerations around embedded carbon, packaging, product life extension, etc. Right now, I'm in the middle of expanding the tool to not just include product design teams, but to also include operations. I joined the circular economy team coming from an operations background and kind of, advocated for that team to say, while they're not the ones designing the product, they're the ones building it, and they have insight into improvement opportunities, assembly pain points. How might we be able to streamline the design to provide ease of manufacturing? And they also play a hugely important role in making sure that our scrap material enters into a circular process as well. They're the key team, in fact, to close the loop after design has been finalized, material has been purchased. Once we have scrap material, and we have it, how can we eliminate it? Through how can we design out that waste? How can we reduce it? How can we reuse it or repurpose it before we even think about recycling or end-of-life options? So the overall goal of this tool is to teach our design teams, our engineers, our value stream managers, our machine operators, how to design out waste and how to identify the touch points that allow for that and allow for a closed loop. We encourage that this tool be deployed internally during all new product development processes, as it's best used during the concept phase, and then as you work your way through, used as a checklist and guidebook to see if what you have developed is a product that, compared to its original concept or another product baseline, has a lower environmental impact that we can justify with this data. Again, we're big on providing the educational environment to utilize these tools and not just hand it out and say go. So to roll this playbook out, we not only created an overview module that we recorded, but we've held overview sessions, and prior to, in preparation for the playbook to be complete and ready to be piloted, we held circular economy workshops where we played around with on Microsoft Whiteboard with design concepts totally unrelated to Legrand. And that was to get them familiar with circularity, get them out of their heads about design constraints that we may be familiar with internally, team constraints that they may be used to. So what we did is introduce the principles of circular economy and then worked our engineers through a series of prompts where they had to redesign something like a running shoe or a kitchen appliance based on what they now knew of circularity. And this was to, again, familiarize them with the concept, spark some inspiration, and then also follow that up with the playbook as a tool. While this tool is specific to the Legrand process and not shareable, I did want to highlight it as a best practice because it's a tool that binds multiple teams, and in a way that honestly I really haven't seen before in our company, in the same kind of way where it facilitates collaboration across many teams and facilitates discussion. It enables the conditions to ask the questions that we want to be asking, to make the right connections. And it's something that we've gotten tremendous positive feedback on, both the playbook itself and the workshops that we held around circularity. So I believe that might be, correct me if I'm wrong, my last slide. But the common theme around these best practices is the cross-functionality and collaboration, creating the educational environment, creating digestible content versus, leaving the CSR burden on those outside of the team that created the targets. This sense of communication is our responsibility, and we, so I wanted to share our team structure, the way we deliver our roadmap messaging to the company, as well as the two other examples I shared that I do not doubt have added major value to our sustainability team and our company. So with that, free to answer any questions.
Great, Jillian, thank you very, very much, and Claire, thank you as well. Hopefully, we'll bring Claire back. There she is. Please put your questions in the chat, raise your hand, do something. But I do know how to use the chat feature, so that's probably the most reliable. And I think, Claire, the first question is for you. And the question is whether or not distribution will be a choke point for the expansion of electric vehicle use.
That's a good question. I think we're looking at, well, there are a lot of challenges with electric vehicle adoption. Our key focus is installing the electric vehicle charging stations and working with municipalities to make that happen. We're working through those challenges currently, and I think power storage is going to be a really critical component to that scenario to make it possible.
If there are folks out there that are looking at installing electric vehicle charging stations, is there a set of standards in Massachusetts or Connecticut? Is there somewhere where somebody can look to see what the standards and the requirements are if they want to put it in at their business or their office?
That's an excellent question. We have a dedicated team working on EVs that would be able to answer that better than me. So let me get back to you on that, and I'm happy to look into it.
Perfect. I'm around. I'm easily found.
Okay.
Do we have other questions for this august group? Nobody wants to know how you can keep 99.6% of your waste from hitting a landfill, really? Okay. Well, that being the case, then I'm going to say thank you to both of you. Thank you, Jillian, and thank you, Claire. And I greatly appreciate you presenting those success stories. They were fantastic. It proof that it really can be possible to be sustainable and be a successful company in the 21st century. So thank you. Marcy, I turn it over to you or to Chuck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jillian and Claire, and our DEP speakers before then.